A very warm welcome to all the CA Foundation students. Let us continue our series of booster videos for CA Foundation Law. Today we are going to discuss 3 questions from the Sale of Goods Act 1930. Now the questions which I have chosen, they are unique, they are different because many students have a doubt in these questions. The first 2 questions which I have chosen, they are similar questions, but they have been answered differently in the module. So I have received many queries from students. So I thought, why not address it through a video, because I'm very confident that many other students may also be having doubt with regards to these 2 questions. The third question which I have chosen is from unpaid seller, and it is on the provision which normally students avoid studying. So through these videos, you will revise that concept also. If you're watching my video for the first time, I am CA Preeti Aggarwal and I make videos specially for you. Subscribe to your channel Theory Masters Learning and hit the bell icon so that you get notifications for all the booster lectures. We are going to continue our case study discussion even after the July exam, and that will benefit the students who are appearing for the November 21 attempt. So do subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss out on the notifications for these videos. Also visit my website theorymasterslearning.com for CA books and lectures. The 2 questions in which most of the students have doubt are from Unit 3 of Sale of Goods Act. You can go to module page 2.48 and 2.49, question 3 and 6. They are similar questions, but the solution given in the module is different for both the answers. So what I have done is I have prepared a very short note comparing the different sections which they have used in the answer. Now, this will give you a very clear understanding, first, why they have applied this section, and second, in the 6th question, they have applied section 21. So whether they should have applied that concept, that section or not. So in the 3rd question, students, let us read the question first and then I will quickly go through the note. Mr. X agreed to purchase 100 bales of cotton from V out of his large stock and sent his men to take the delivery of it. So Mr. S has agreed to purchase the cotton from V. So before you proceed, students, always highlight the buyer and the seller. Always identify the parties first. The second thing which should come to your mind while reading this question is that he has agreed to purchase 100 bales of cotton out of his large stock. Now the words out of show that the goods are unascertained goods. The words out of show that the goods are unascertained goods. So he sent his men to select those goods and take the delivery, but they could pack only 60 bales. Later on, there was an accidental fire and the entire stock was destroyed, including the 60 bales that were already packed. So in this case, the buyers people, they had already packed 60 bales and everything was destroyed. Okay, so no delivery was taken by the buyer. Everything was lying. All the goods were lying with the seller. The packed goods, that is 60 units, they were destroyed. Okay. Referring to the provisions of the Sale of Goods Act, explain who will bear the loss and to what extent. Actually, the question is very simple. But the problem arises in the various provisions which they have applied while answering this question. Answer is very simple, that the buyer will be liable only for the goods which have been packed. They have been packed with his knowledge. How come? His men packed it. So it is as if it is the goods are packed, they are appropriated with the consent of the buyer. Well, answer is very simple, but you cannot just finish the answer in 2 sentences. So we need to write down provisions. Now, they have first applied section 26. Okay, so while you read this question and my note, also keep the module with you. Go to the model answer and see the provisions that they have applied. So first they have applied section 26. The section is on the risk which prima facie passes with the property. What is the meaning of property? Property means ownership. So risk passes with ownership. the one who owns the goods will also bear the risk. Now, the provision says that goods must remain, the goods remain at the seller's risk until the property is transferred to the buyer. Now, this is not the exact wordings in the provision. Okay, I have simplified this for you. So, risk prima facie passes with the property. So, the one who owns the goods will also bear the risk. Goods remain at the seller's risk until the property is transferred to the buyer. So once the property, the ownership is transferred to the buyer, the risk is also transferred. So that is that simplified version I have written in red. Once the buyer becomes the owner, he will bear the loss even if the goods are still in the possession of the seller. Now students, you must be wondering, why have they applied section 26? Read the question carefully. The goods were packed, but they were still lying with the seller. So who will bear the loss? Law says that risk passes with ownership. So the owner bears the risk. Buyer has become the owner. He will bear the risk even though the goods are not in his possession. Even though the goods are in possession of the seller. That is why they have mentioned section 26. Then in the model answer, if you see, they have also written section 18 read with section 23. Now, why have they used section 18? Why have they mentioned it in the answer? Section 18 relates to goods must be ascertained. Ascertained means they must be identified and set aside for the contract. Okay, goods must be ascertained. Now, in case of unascertain goods, how did I come to know that the goods are uncertain? It's in the question itself. See, there is a hint, out of. It means the goods are uncertain. In case of uncertain goods, ownership is transferred to the buyer when the goods are ascertained. Ascertained means identified and kept aside. So identifying is ascertainment, keeping it aside is appropriation. So you identify and keep the goods aside, ownership is transferred. So section 18, now let's read it with section 23. How are the goods ascertained? So if it is a contract for sale of uncertain goods or future goods, then ownership is transferred to the buyer when the goods are appropriated to the contract. So can I say that if I club both these points, section 18 read with section 23, the goods need to be first ascertained and appropriated, only then ownership will transfer. Yes, just ascertaining, that is identifying, will not serve the purpose. You also have to keep the goods aside with the intention of transferring ownership to the buyer. So ownership is transferred when the goods are appropriated. Now, how does appropriation take place? It is done either by the seller with the consent of buyer. Like here, the goods are appropriated by the seller with the consent of buyer. How do you know buyer has consented? He has sent his men. The men are involved in appropriating the goods, or it may be done by the buyer with the consent of seller. So both have to be read together because ascertainment and appropriation both are required to pass the ownership in case of uncertain goods. So now students, let us go through the model answer. I'm reading the answer for question 3. Where is it? Yes. Section 26, okay, this is section 26 of the Sale of Goods Act. It provides that unless otherwise agreed, goods remain at the seller's risk until the ownership is transferred to the buyer. They are at buyer's risk whether delivery has been made or not. Okay, so I have simplified the provisions for you. The ownership is with the buyer. He will bear the risk even though the goods are not in his possession. Section 18 read with section 23. It provides that in a contract for sale of uncertain goods, I'll change the ink students. In case of uncertain goods, no property is transferred unless and until the goods are certain, and when it is a contract for sale of uncertain or future goods by description. So this is nothing but section 23. The goods are in deliverable state and unconditionally appropriated either by the seller with the consent of buyer, buyer with the consent of seller. I'm sure you did not understand anything. That is why I simplified it in this manner. You can pause the video and take down notes. Yes. Okay. So in this case, if the bales have been selected with the consent of buyer, which I think is yes, So in this case, the ownership is transferred for those 60 units. For the remaining 40 bales, the seller will bear the loss. But if they have not been selected with the buyer's representative or consent, then for the entire loss, the seller will be liable. Actually, this was not required in the question, because the question clearly mentioned that the buyer had sent his people, had sent his men to appropriate the goods. So actually, this is not required. I think they are just they have just mentioned it so that it just completes the entire provision. Now let's read question 6. Okay, I'm reading question 6 now. Question 6 says that X agreed to purchase 300 tons of wheat from Y out of a larger stock. Okay, out of means they are uncertain. X sent his men with the sacks and 150 tons of wheat were put into the sacks. All right. Then there was a sudden fire and the entire stock was gutted. It was destroyed. Who will bear the loss and why? Now, there is actually some error in the question, I think. On one hand, they are saying that he agreed to purchase 300 tons out of a larger stock. It means the goods are uncertain. And they are also saying that the goods were put into sack. It means they were put in deliverable state, which is actually a characteristic of specific goods. Specific goods, they are not in deliverable state, so they are to be put in deliverable state. Ownership is transferred when the goods are put in deliverable state and the buyer comes to know about it. I don't know why they have merged these two. Now, in the model answer, they have mentioned section 21, which is actually for specific goods to be put in deliverable state. How? I don't know how they have applied that. Over here, the goods are uncertain, but I think they have assumed that the goods are specific. We are just putting it into sacks. I think that is what they have assumed. Okay. Maybe that was the intention for applying section 21. They are assuming that the goods are specific. Now, many a time students ask me, ma'am, what should we do? We can't make these assumptions, no? What if such question comes in the exam? I feel students just ignore section 21 and concentrate on section 18 and 23. Okay, so you can write this answer. Now over here, what they are saying that ownership is transferred when the goods are put in deliverable state and the buyer comes to know about it. But this is only when you assume that the goods are specific goods, not when you assume that these questions are the same. It is uncertain. If you are not confident in the exam, then you can simply write that we have assumed goods are uncertain. Therefore, we have applied section 26, 18 and 23. Your answer, your assumption will be considered. Don't worry. Okay? So don't worry. And I think you should go with this model answer for both the questions. That is my opinion. So students, you can pause the video and write this. I don't know how much should I zoom in. This is the entire note if you want it in one screen. Okay, done writing. All right. So I hope your doubt is clear. After reading this note, you will understand the answer properly. Next, let us discuss one more question from unpaid seller. Okay, so now go to unpaid seller. That is page 2.68 of the new module. Go to unpaid seller and I have chosen question 4. I have chosen question 4. Now the reason is that many a times in case of unpaid seller, we go through the rights of an unpaid seller against the goods. But we never study the rights of unpaid seller against the buyer personally. Okay, so this is just to revise the concept of action that can be taken against the buyer personally. Suraj sold his car to Sohan for 75,000. Suraj is the seller and Sohan is the buyer. He sold it for 75,000. After inspection and satisfaction, Sohan paid 25,000 and took possession of the car, promising to pay the remaining amount within 1 month. Now, students, while reading this question, it's an it's a question relating to unpaid seller. In case of unpaid seller, the rights will depend upon whether the seller is in possession or not. If he is in possession, then he can exercise right against the goods. But over here, the buyer has taken the possession. So you lose the right of lien, you lose the right of stoppage, you lose the right of resale because the goods are not in your possession. But for unpaid seller, you can definitely take action against the buyer personally. You can file a suit for price, for interest, non-acceptance, etc. Later on, Sohan refuses, saying that the car was not in good condition. You have to advise Suraj as to what remedy is available to him against Sohan. Okay. So we have to advise him as to the remedy that is available. So students, over here, there is a small note which I have prepared for you. In case of an unpaid seller, seller has the right, an unpaid seller has the right against the goods if he is in possession of the goods. But if he is not in possession of the goods, then yes, he can take action against the buyer personally. As per section 55 over here, students, these are just the provisions which they have mentioned in the answer. Provision is simple. Buyer has taken the possession. Seller can only file a case against him for the price. Where the contract of sale, the property in the goods has passed to the buyer. Property here means ownership. So when the ownership has been passed, the ownership is passed and the buyer wrongfully either neglects or refuses to pay for the goods. So he's not paying for the goods, he's refusing. Then the seller can sue him for the price. Why? Because he has transferred ownership, no? Buyer, you are the owner, you are liable for the full price. But what if the price is payable on a certain day? Like I have promised that I will pay the price on this particular day, irrespective of delivery. Buyer has wrongfully neglected or refused to pay the price, seller may sue him for the price because you had promised you will pay it on a particular day. It makes no difference if the ownership has been transferred or not, goods have been appropriated or not. You had promised to pay the price on a particular day, you have to pay the price. So in this case, we can take action against the buyer personally. So Suraj will succeed. He is entitled to also claim. Okay, this is also. The first remedy is you can claim the price. You can also claim the interest on the remaining amount because he delayed in paying. Interest during the pendency of the suit till the suit is the judgment, it is decided, and also the cost of proceedings, the cost of taking legal action. So these are the remedies which are available. Students, I think that you must go through these remedies. It is my sincere request and also advice. Don't leave this question, can be asked in the exam. So these were the 3 questions which I identified from the Sale of Goods Act. In the next video, we will discuss the questions from Companies Act and I will continue my booster videos for the November attempt also. So even after this exam, do subscribe and keep watching this space for more videos. Visit my website theorymasterslearning.com for CA books and lectures for CA Foundation and CA Inter Law.